thank you very much to Meredith and Schreiber for inviting us, for hosting us today, and all of you for coming. We didn't really know who would turn up at 11 o'clock, but it's very, very good to see you all here. And well, Carol and myself, we're part of members of David Brazier's or Abhidharma videos, we call him, the global channel that he established. Anyway, more than anyone, Dharma Video himself will tell you more of his experience, but we're very happy that you've come. This is a very unique opportunity because Dharma Video lives in France, and has decided to come and visit us here in the good weather here, which is now very important in France. So this is an opportunity. But anyway, as part of the Shanga, Dharma Video visits many of our members around. It's an opportunity for all of us as well to get together. So we thought it was a very interesting opportunity to come here to an English-speaking audience, which is also easier, at least for me, in terms of the translation. So, in that sense, very grateful for Dharma Video to be here, and I will hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, yes, as has just been said. I've been in Mexico now.
Can you speak up a little, please? The fans are really
Yeah. Should we turn the fans off?
Yeah, we can turn the fans off.
Quite a competition, you know. If I speak at this volume.
That usually is the best. The fans are
Yes. Yes, I've been in Mexico for 10 days now. So I've been over to the other side of the peninsula. There's a little retreat center over there on the Caribbean coast. So we spent 6 days, 7 days there. A week. And that was very nice. It's the first time I've been in Mexico. I've been in Canada, the United States, and Peru and Argentina, but this is my first time in Mexico. I do travel quite a lot, as Alejandro hinted, because our Sangha is like the community, the network, is very scattered internationally. And this is partly a consequence of the fact that everybody now uses Zoom. Since the pandemic, during the pandemic, when everybody was in Europe was confined to home and starting to use particularly Zoom, but also Skype and some other medium. I started doing podcasts very regularly. That was the only way to reach people. And of course people appreciated it at that time because they were stuck at home. And out of that, the Sangha has developed in a particular way. But we've also been running a 2-year program in Buddhist psychology, about which I'll explain a bit. That's what I'm here for. For many years, actually, but it's taken, again, for the same reasons, it's taken on a somewhat different form in the last 4 or 5 years with everybody, with the possibilities of Zoom and so on. And this has meant that people have got involved with it from all over the planet. Sometimes a bit tricky organising a meeting when you've got people in very different time zones, but still, it seems to work very well. To begin with, I was very surprised. I thought, you never get a real connection without people meeting, personally. But yeah, people connect. And then when they do meet, like once every so often, we have an in-person meeting somewhere, France or Spain or somewhere. there's a wonderful atmosphere because people have made a connection over the past years, say, oh, here you are. So that it seems to be working. It seems to be working well. I personally, I have a long history with Buddhism. I'm not wearing my brown robe, but I am a Buddhist monk. And I'm also made studies of Buddhism of a number of traditions over many decades. And of course, standing here, perhaps some of you have no idea what about the subject, and perhaps some others know quite a bit. So I may have to say some things that you find too simple, or some things that you might find too complicated. But I'm very open to answering questions and going over stuff, or saying things twice, or in a different way, or whatever is useful to you. I'm only here to be useful to you. You've got me for an hour, so if I am any use, you can use me. So the talk is called The Conditioned Mind, isn't it? Buddhist psychology, the interesting thing you see is that we, in modern times, we've developed this thing called psychology in modern culture. And there are a number of different, you might say, schools or approaches to psychology. So you had, well, you started with Freud and psychoanalysis, and analytical psychology, and the unconscious, and so on. And then you have behavioral psychology, which is almost the opposite pole, cognitive psychology, humanistic psychology, and then many different modi, art therapy, drama therapy, etc., etc. So it's sort of proliferated. But, and I've been trained in a few of these. But Buddhism, in many ways, anticipated a lot of this knowledge, this information, this methodology, by more than 2 millennia. So you go back to the Buddha, was, I'm sure you know, a great sage in India, and we're very fortunate in having a huge number of texts of what were really his conversations with people. We don't have video, unfortunately, but, but we do have something like verbatim, he said, she said, sort of stuff. And clearly it must have been amazing to meet with that, the impact of, because people's lives were often changed after a very short meeting with this man. In a way, you can say that's a remarkable psychotherapy in a way. You have a half hour, 3/4 of an hour meeting with somebody and your life is never the same again. This is remarkable. So, and he did have many encounters like that. So, afterwards, after he died, after he passed on, there would have been a sort of, how did he do that? and a literature developed called the Abhidharma. Dharma is like the word we use for the teaching that the Buddha gave, but through these discourses and also through set lectures sometimes. So that's the Dharma. But then developed something called the Abhidharma, which is sort of like another level of Dhamma. And this is an analysis. So these early Abhidharmic texts are, in a sense, they're the world's first psychology textbooks. And they're 2,000 plus years old. So they're a remarkable source. And then down the centuries, people have written commentaries on these texts. So there's now a very large volume of literature developed differently in different schools of Buddhism, but essentially it has a coherence. And this is what we call Buddhist psychology. But a lot of my work has been to take some of these texts, which if you just have a straight translation done by a linguist, you'd find a bit hard to read. They're a bit obscure sometimes. A lot of my work has been to present them in ways that contemporary people are going to find practical and useful. And also sometimes to relate them to our modern psychology. Because in some ways, as I say, they anticipate modern psychology. In some other ways, they seem to contradict it. And so you have a very interesting sort of chemistry between these two cultural sources, you might say. And Buddhism, you probably know people, it's a sort of very potted idea of Buddhism. You have various practices and disciplines that lead to a spiritual awakening, usually called enlightenment or awakening, something of that kind. So, Buddhism as presented by the different schools of Buddhism is often like that. Do this practice, do this meditation, or do this ritual, or learn these texts, or whatever. And it will lead you to enlightenment. Buddhist psychology, well, you know, what is it? If you're an enlightened person, there's time to do this very basically. If you're an enlightened person, what? Well, you could say Buddhism is a religion of kindness. So it's a religion of peace. It's a religion of equanimity. You see the statues of Buddha. What does it symbolize? You know, calm. This is evident, I think, to people who are not Buddhist at all. In Europe, there's probably more Buddha statues in gardens than there are Buddhists. Buddhists, you know, especially in countries like the Netherlands. People put them in their garden because it conveys the idea of the sense of peace. So, yeah, so Buddhism teaches you be kind, be compassionate, be peaceful, be equanimous. So why don't we do it? Why is the world such a mess? And in many ways, what Buddhist psychology is about is answering that question. Why are we not enlightened? While the Buddhist teachings, if you go to a Zen class or a Theravada Buddhist class, the general frame is you're learning to progress towards enlightenment. Well, what Buddhist psychology does is to explain why we're not all enlightened. And why we have conditioned minds. Yeah? Why we don't easily just, I'm sure many of you have made New Year resolutions, and how long do they last? You slide out of it in no time. It's like January the 1st, January the 2nd, you're keen, you know, going to lose weight or stop smoking or whatever it is. How long does it last? You know, 7 days in, you've probably slipped out of it. And you think, how did that happen? It's not like you deliberately changed your mind. Your diet slips or whatever. You may keep your diet up for, who knows, 3 months, and then 6 months down the line, you still weigh as much as you did before you started. And you think, well, how did that happen? It's like a mystery to us. In a sense, Buddhism discovered the unconscious before Freud. The workings of the mind, the deeper workings of the mind, are apparent in the Buddhist texts. And this is called conditioning. Now, what do we mean by conditioning in Buddhism? It's not quite the same as the word conditioning exists in modern psychology, behaviorism particularly. You may know about Pavlov's dogs, and this is conditioning. Well, yes, that's an aspect of conditioning, but Buddhist conditioning is a bit broader. The idea is that things can only happen if the necessary conditions are in place. You can only sit in the posture and position you're in now because there's a chair underneath you, and there's a floor underneath that. Yeah? You take away these conditions, you can't do it. It's impossible. And if we did take them away, something would change. Right? So the same is true all through your life, that all sorts of conditions prop up your habitual way of being. Now, if something comes along and takes some of those props out, you have to change. You can't necessarily predict how you'll change, but you will change. You will respond to that situation and you'll do something new. Now, this is an exercise of your will. In that situation, you have a bit of a crisis, a bit of panic, you lose your job, or your car gets stolen, or things you take for granted suddenly aren't there. Your spouse walks out, or your money support dries up. Any of these things, you suddenly have to adjust in ways that you wouldn't have adjusted without that change coming along. So, what do you do? Well, you're at a sort of choice point, in a way. Depending on what you do, your life may come out of it a lot better, or it may come out of it a lot worse. You have to exercise your will at this point. You make intentional action. So, Buddhist psychology broadly is that every intentional act, whether it's in a big situation like that, or even little situations like this, or everyday life, all the time we're making intentional actions. You choose to come to this lecture, you choose to listen to me, etc. Each of these intentional actions leaves a trace in the mind. Technically, these are called bija, which literally means a seed. Now, this gives you an image. You see, the seed will regrow. That action that you made will leave a seed that can repeat later. Now, we planted quite a lot of seeds when we were kids. When we were little people, we were all the time meeting new situations. Our conditions were always changing. Some big person sent us to school. Or, all sorts of, we were coerced in all sorts of ways. We had to eat things we didn't want to eat. Like that, you see. So in childhood, we made a lot of willful decisions. Yeah, the mummy comes with this horrible, whatever it is, custard again. Did you choose to, all right then, I'll eat it, or pick it up and throw it across the room, or scream your head off, or you had a certain, not very wide, but a certain range of possibilities. Yeah? And you made a choice. Yeah? Now these, from the Buddhist point of view, these choices that you make, even from when you're little, they sow seeds. And so your life will go on with you making similar decisions later. New conditions will come along. How do I cope with this? You sort of unconsciously trace back to something similar. And up comes a seed. Like that. So this is one of the basic bits of Buddhist psychology. We're conditioned in that way. The willful actions, the intentional actions that we've made, they create what we call karma. They repeat. And there's planted in the depths of the mind. We forget about them. It's not like we're consciously aware of them. But they're a resource that we fall back on when we need to. And so our lives become shaped in this way. And then we grow up a bit and we get involved in society and we have to present ourselves in some way. So, in a certain way, that you could say that these traces, these seeds, also get sorted out in the mind. The mind naturally sorts them out into constellations or complexes, which the technical word is samskaras. So in the depth of the mind, we build structures of these intentions. And on the back of that emerges our attitude towards life. So not just little bits, but our whole attitude to life, our whole self-presentation, if you like. We build an image of ourselves, or a style of ourselves, really, that we present, which becomes our passport to social participation. It determines who we get involved with, what our friends are, what groups we're part of, and so on. You see. And yeah, so the contents of the deeper mind crystallize in a certain way, determine our attitudes, our intention, sort of global intention towards life. And this determines how we go through life and what's important to us and what we choose, you see. Because the thing is that it then goes round in a circle. Because if you have a certain attitude, you choose the things that become props for that attitude. So that you go round and round and round. And this is why we're not enlightened. Because we're constantly reinforcing our existing take on life. We present an image or a face to the world. And it works up to a point. It works for us. It facilitates our social life. But it also blinds us because it's selective. It's only a part of what's possible. So if we marry this with the search for enlightenment, you can say that in a certain sense everybody is conditioned in this way, but also at the same time everybody is on their own kind of journey or spiritual progress to sort this out. You see, because if you are only conditioned, you build these intentions, there are always contradictions between these intentions. Yeah? Part of you wants to lose weight and another part wants to eat sugar. There's always a clash. You see. The traces that you've laid down always involve contradictions. And so there's a pressure to sort it out. And sometimes you have moments of sudden insight where a whole load of things go click, 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 click. And this is what we regard as a sort of spiritual awakening. But most of the time, that doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, we stay in our habitual pattern, going round and round and round. And the attitude we have to life makes us choose certain things. Those things then condition the mind. We respond to them. The mind is, so at that level you can say the mind is conditioned by its objects, by the things that it chooses. So this is simplest level, I think. Might say, is this simple or is this too complicated? You're with me. You've got the general idea. Yeah. So yeah, and Buddhism then has lots of detail on different patterns of conditioning that can occur, in what circumstances and how, and different practices that you can do to alter this one or that one or the other one, and so on. So sometimes you make progress piecemeal, little bit by little bit. Sometimes you have some clarity. So you can say that on your journey, your spiritual journey, if you like, when you have some clarity, you then have a sense of purpose. And things in your life then kind of come together around your sense of purpose. Because once we have a sense of purpose, we're willing to pay the price of it. Yeah. And if you want to, I don't know, you want to become an architect, you have to go to college and learn. So you're going to put up with it, you're going to pay for it, you're going to put up with the inconvenience until you arrive at your goal, as it were. This is true of many, many things in life. Once we've got a clear purpose, we acquire a willingness to put up with what's involved. And to your enlightened person, in a way, has a kind of global willingness. They have their purposefulness is a bigger picture. They're not just trying to get one goal, but they have a sort of sense of, well, we say compassion for all sentient beings. Well, you know, it's a big number. So, yeah, so that's how it works. I think I'm going to pause and see if you come back at me with questions or comments, and then I will see where I take it from there. Yes?
I just want to say I've been practicing Buddhism on and off. I've been practicing Buddhism on and off for 19 years.
Yes.
I think you're doing a great job. Fantastic job.
I'm trying.
You've got it.
What sort of Buddhism have you been practicing?
Kadapa Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like saying I'm a Methodist instead of a Baptist.
Yes, Kadampa is one branch of Tibetan Buddhism. Buddhism spread into many different countries in Asia, and it took on colouring in different countries, depending on the local culture. I have been to Asia many times and seen Buddhism in different countries. My own practice is largely based on Japanese Buddhism, and it has its distinctive features. Because in a sense, a religion or a way or whatever you call it of this type is in certain way a sort of prototype for a whole civilization. Out of it come many things, forms of art, architecture, social organization, and so on. So there's a sort sort of cross-fertilization when Buddhism moves into a new country. It started in India and then spread north from India into Central Asia, Tarim Basin, which was on the sort of crossroads between the Silk Route and a north-south route that went from Kashmir up to Outer Mongolia. And then that area became Buddhist, and then it spread down the Silk Route into China, and from China to Korea, and from Korea to Japan, and now it's from Japan mostly to North America. And that's the form that I picked up, which initially I studied in England. From English teacher, went to Japan and trained and came back. Yeah. Thank you.
Where are you based right now? Where are you based physically? Because you said
Usually in the departure lounge of some airport.
That's cute. Answer.
I do have a little house in France. Last year I moved from a place in the countryside into a village, mainly so that it's to facilitate my traveling, to have a simple base from which I can go. Because as I said, the Sangha, the Buddhist group that I'm involved with, is becoming more and more international. And well, it is nice to communicate with people on Zoom and so on, but it's also very good to go and see people.
Here we are.
Go and make a nuisance of yourself. Yeah.
I have a question. This might be too big for this class, but just as far as time, it's about karma.
Yes.
You know, when you were speaking, you were talking about seeds that are rooted in you that
Yeah.
come up later.
Yeah.
And Buddhist philosophy is based on karma. But why do bad things happen to good people?
Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, first let me, as a preface to it, I can remember being at a big meeting addressed by the Dalai Lama. This was the, I don't know, 25th anniversary of something or other. And we were all there, a large crowd. And somebody asked, could the Dalai Lama explain karma? Too difficult question.
It is. It's a mind-blowing question.
I think, you know, the broad notion of karma was part of Indian history, and still is part of Indian culture. I think what the Buddha did with it, the Buddha didn't invent the idea of karma. It was already well established in the culture in Iran. But you see, there's two ways of looking at karma, and the Buddha, in a sense, challenged and, you could say, almost revolutionized the way of regarding karma. Because karma can be taken, and often is, in a very fatalistic way. You know, that you are as you are because of your previous lives, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, it's just how you are. The Buddha said, well, if this is because of that, this can be a cause for that. You see? But actually, if you understand this karma idea properly, it makes a difference what you do. And I think that's in a way what I've been talking about. Like a lot of, right at the moment in contemporary psychology, there's a huge amount about trauma. Everybody is traumatized.
That was my next question.
One way or another. Well, I'm ahead of you. and lots of studies now about if you've suffered such and such a trauma, what will be the effect. That's not really the Buddhist take on it. The Buddhist take on it is, yeah, for sure, everybody's going to experience traumas of one sort or another. What matters is, how did you respond? It's what willful action you performed when you were in that situation. Now this means that bad things happening can be what cripples you, or they can be your gate to awakening. Like that.
Yes.
So
I mean,
bad things happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, in Buddhism it's called dukkha. You could have a t-shirt, dukkha happens. And nothing you can do about it. The building might fall down, you know. Especially in Mexico.
What was your t-shirt slogan? I missed it.
Dukkha happens.
Dukkha happens.
Dukkha happens. Yes. Bad things happen. But what matters is how you respond. You can't predict the future, but you can act in a way that sows the seeds for a better future. But you can't know with precision what that will be. But it matters how you act. It matters how you receive the information, how you process it. And so, yeah, it's a different attitude. Bad things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. It's just how it is. Yes.
I have a Dalai Lama story. I went to a 3-day workshop in San Francisco with him, and that was my treat for my 37th birthday. And I thought I'd be all spiritual, and I didn't understand 90% of it. And it
You
was
managed 10%.
I know. I thought I was doing well. It was mostly monks. I mean, most everybody had monk outfits on. They were all like advanced souls. And at one point he says, it doesn't matter if you understand. Even the dog in the house with good dharma succeeds. So I'm running around later on going, I'm the dog, I'm the dog. But that's it. You don't have to understand all of it.
No.
And that's what I got out of it. It's like, okay, I'm not that advanced a soul.
Yeah.
It's okay. I got something, like you said, 10% maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's sort of two-edged in a way.
Yeah.
There is a benefit in knowing more. There is a benefit in understanding, in learning, studying, and so on. But it's not essential. It is possible to just cut straight through. And this sometimes happens. People with a good heart, or something happens in your life that, you see, you can't, although we have all these methods, we have schools of Buddhism, and we say, do this meditation or whatever, there is no practice that guarantees spiritual awakening. And in practice, as a sort of generalization, I would say that people, from what I've seen, people tend to have spiritual awakenings when there is some combination of a bad thing happening and some inspiration. And when these things happen to coincide, which may be just chance, or maybe the gods are looking after us, or whatever, I don't know, but from our point of view, it looks like you couldn't have predicted it. When this happens, it can be very awakening, because you realize, oh, I can see possibilities I could never see before. While I was doing that, I mean, I don't know if this explains it at all, but I remember when I was in Korea, I was invited to go to a theatre performance because there was a friend of my host performing. And we watched this performance, and I thought the actor was pretty talented, but the performance was, the play was awful. But it was continuing, you know, and I was talking about it after, and I said, you know, the best thing that can happen for that actor is that this play fails. Because then they'll look around for something else. Because they've got talents that are not being used. But while the play continues to bring enough audience to pay the rent, this won't happen. Yes. The person's potential will never flower. Now, this is true of many people's lives. Here's the, it's true not just at spiritual level, it's true in lots of practical things as well. The English industrialist who Virgin Airlines and stuff.
Richard.
You know who I mean?
Richard
Richard Branson. Yeah. Well, what was he shaped by? He was shaped by going bankrupt and put in prison. And then he came out with a very changed mind about how he was going to do things. There are many stories like this in Buddhist history. The greatest Indian philosopher after the Buddha himself was called Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna turned to a spiritual life when his friends were killed. He had two very close friends, they were both killed while they were on some escapade. And suddenly he thought, life's serious. In a way that up until then, no, really, not taking it seriously. It's true of many people. I follow Zen and Pure Land tradition sort of together. One of the great writers of the Zen tradition was Dogen, who I've written a book. And it's said that he decided to become a monk as he watched the incense smoke rise above his mother's coffin. His mother died when he was about 10 or so. The other, I said Zen and Pure Land. The Pure Land tradition was founded by Honen Chonin, and he was hugely influenced, again by the death of a parent. And his father was assassinated, and the little boy went to his father, with the arrow sticking out of him, and as the father was dying, he said, don't seek revenge, seek a spiritual path. And then this changed the little boy's life dramatically. So sometimes bad things happen which have very good consequences. Sometimes we don't actually take life seriously enough until something bad does happen. So that's a part answer.
It's just a word that's used a lot. I think the context of the word is really negative, like you started off with.
Yeah.
And that was a very good description of that. And I agree, because I've had bad stuff happen, and there was a choice that I had to make.
Yes,
Yes.
that's right.
Yeah.
Then you had to make a choice.
That's right. Yeah.
You see, rather than drift.
Exactly.
You see. And so we talk about sudden awakening, gradual cultivation. You have something like that, you have a sudden awakening.
Absolutely.
And then you cultivate your life in a new way. It's opened your eyes.
in your travels, have you found that Buddhism changes from country to country? Is it ever unrecognizable?
No, but unrecognized. It certainly changes from country to country in its social manifestation. So Buddhism in India is quite political because there was the big movement of converting the untouchables to Buddhism as a way of changing the whole social structure. So Buddhists Indian Buddhists are quite political. Vietnamese Buddhists are totally unpolitical because they had the experience of, in 1975, of the country becoming communist. And the communist government's original intention was to eliminate religions. But there were 11 schools of Buddhism in Vietnam, and they all got together and they decided, we will demonstrate to the government that Buddhism is good for Vietnam. And we'll do that by getting involved in social welfare and relief work and so on. So in Vietnam, you have this strange polity in which you have a communist government, a totally free enterprise economy, and all the social services run by the two main religions, Buddhism and Catholicism. In Japan, Buddhism is much associated with dying, with the end of life, counseling in relation to the end of life, and so on. Japanese people often get married in a Shinto shrine, which is a different religion, and buried in a Buddhist one, or cremated.
And what about Tibetan? What about Tibetan?
Tibetans, well, of course, Tibet has this. It's been invaded, and so there are Tibetans now. And this is another interesting sort of paradox, isn't it? Because of the invasion of Tibet, there's now Tibetan Buddhism all over the world. But it has a distinctive character. It's a very elaborate form of Buddhism.
Can you contrast Tibetan Buddhism with Zen Buddhism? Like, what are the essential differences, or how did it change?
With Zen Buddhism, I think you say they say that the essence of Zen Buddhism is the focus on in a way a simple form of meditation, whereas Tibetan Buddhism has like 100 meditations. So Tibetan Buddhism is a whole elaborate culture with many texts, many different pathways, and so on within it. So if you go to a Kajapa Tibetan monastery, probably every person living in that monastery has their own practice. Their teacher will have given a practice suitable for you, and a different practice for you, and a different practice for you, and each one is doing their practice. You go to a Zen monastery, they're all doing the same. The whole institution is ritualized, and the emphasis is upon willingness to take part in that structure. You learn through being in that community. So in that way, they're quite different. But in terms of the basic, why are they like that? The more fundamental things, they're much the same. They say that Tibetan Buddhism is a kind of amalgam of Indian Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, with the emphasis on the Indian. Because a lot of the Indian Buddhism that went to Tibet went because difficulties in India, Muslim invasions and so on.
And geography.
Yeah, people went to Tibet. So Tibet picked up what we would say later Mahayana Indian Buddhism with some influence from China. Buddhism didn't get to Tibet until about the year 800, whereas it was in China from the year dot. So we, in a certain way, Tibetan Buddhism is a later development.
What about Thailand?
Thailand is Theravada Buddhism. Loosely you can say that the Theravada Buddhists, who are Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, those countries. Yes, they're in the southern part of India. And the Theravadian monks try to live as much like the actual physical lifestyle that the Buddha lived as possible. So they have a long list of rules about when they can eat and what they can wear and what they can possess and what they can't and so on. So they live like an Indian monk of 2,500 years ago. Well, of course, it's quite difficult in modern society, so they have to make some adjustments, but they make the minimum amount of adjustment in order to live that life. Whereas all the other schools that we've mentioned are what are called Mahayana schools, Zen, Tibetan, Pure Land, and so on. These are all called Mahayana schools. And these, in the simplest terms, these were schools that were willing to be flexible and move with the conditions. And this is partly because they're mostly in the north of Asia, where the climate's just too cold to only have 3 roads and big field living, and it wasn't possible. So, Zen monasteries, for instance, Theravada monks don't work and they don't handle money. But Zen monasteries decided to become self-sufficient and plough their own fields. So, like that. You see, there's been an adaptation. So, I'm glad there's both. I mean, speaking very personally, I'm very glad there's some people preserving the ancient tradition, but I don't want to be one of them. I want to go with the more flexible approach.
Could you speak for a moment about the universality of suffering and about maybe the modern conditioned mind to avoid suffering?
Yes. Okay. So, yes, if you read a basic Teach Yourself Buddhism book, it will start by giving you what are called the 4 Noble Truths, the first of which is suffering, dukkha. Dukkha is suffering in affliction, really. Affliction is an existential universal. The fact that you have a sentient body, you are going to be afflicted. Your body probably is never 100% at peace. There's always something. And as you get older, more and more. And you have to respond to it. You respond to suffering. Now, Buddhism is often then presented as a way of escape from suffering. This is only sort of half true. It's half true in the sense that if you live the kind of life that Buddhism recommends, it will be the case that you'll suffer less, broadly speaking. This is true. But eliminate suffering? No. Not while you're alive as a sentient being. Perhaps in a heaven after you go, but not while you're in this body. Not possible. So there are different ways then of interpreting the text, and I've written whole books about this. So, sometimes what's presented to you is the notion that if you follow what's called the Eightfold Path, this will eliminate suffering or make you eternally happy. Well, it certainly will make you happier, but it's a bit of a sort of catch-22, because you won't follow the Eightfold Path unless you are enlightened. So you can take it as a kind of fake it till you make it. But you'll never fake it completely, you see. You'll never pull it off, because it won't be coming from the heart. Yeah. Merely imitating has some benefit. You have a Buddhist teacher, a guru, or whatever, and you imitate what they do, you will benefit, but you'll never be there. You see? But at some point, you may then have an awakening yourself. You may have a big change of heart. And then you yourself will become a teacher, a presence, a therapeutic presence in the world, you might say. But you won't be like your teacher. You'll be you. You'll be in your style. You see. Your teacher might be a hermit who lives up a mountain, and you might now be a social worker, or whatever. You see, you'll find your style, your way to enact an enlightened, compassionate life, and you'll do it your way. Not because you're sort of egotistical, but just because that's what will happen. It's bound to happen. You have the conditions that of your life. Your mind is conditioned. So you will be using your conditions now in a more enlightened way. That will make you a different sort of presence in the world.
I have to add something.
Yes.
Because the Dalai Lama is my hero, and I happened to be there the day he won the Nobel Prize. We had, there was a conference in Irvine, and he was coming to speak. And he...
We're talking about the Dalai Lama?
Yes.
Yeah.
He came out on the stage, everybody gave him a standing ovation.
Yes.
And his presence said everything. He didn't need to talk.
Yes, that's right.
Because all he did was went, sit down. I didn't do anything. They just gave me a present, you know.
Yeah.
And it said everything.
Yeah.
He didn't need to talk.
Yes, that's right.
You know, and that's what, So when you talk about presence, it's like, whoa, that gave me chills, and it still does when I explain it, because it was just, it blew our minds. We're all standing and screaming, and oh my God, this is amazing, you know. And he's like, sit down, man. Talk.
Yes,
Anyway.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We talk about a Buddhist teacher.
Yeah.
The teaching is just the lived life.
Yeah.
You know, it might include lectures, it might include dialogues and so on. Really, the real teaching is the example of the lived life. How are we doing for time?
We're right on time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Could you, I'm sure he told us, but what is your name? We can Google you and see your books.
You're impressive.
My name is David Brazier.
David Frazier.
Brazier.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Or David Brazier.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And my Buddhist name, right over there, Amelioration. And you can find me on Facebook, and you can find my books on Amazon.
Thank you.
And your
This
podcast?
is just curiosity. I've lived in France. Where in France is your village? I'm not a stalker. I want to. I'm just curious. Is it in the
département de Allier, which is the main towns are Moulins and Montluçon. It's slap in the middle of France, right in the middle of the Hexagon.
You mentioned podcasts, I heard someone else ask, are they podcasts that are publicly available, or were these like in the form of classes?
No, they're available.
Yes.
I put out a podcast 2 or 3 times a month. During the pandemic, I was putting one out every day, so there's quite a backlog of accessible stuff.
Where can we find the access?
I have various websites
Okay.
and stuff. You can always email me, or you can
Starting
find,
from Facebook,
you
can
can
we
find
find
me
your website?
Facebook. I'm David Brazier, author.
Oh, what?
All is one word. David Brazier, author.
And you mentioned there is a little place here by the Caribbean. Is it like a little ashram style, or?
Well, at the house I bought in France.
No, but here in.
Oh, here? No, but
Yes, we can.
Where you-
We can share with you. No, well, I mean, like Carol, followers of David Brazier now a few years, and coincidentally I live in Mexico and I connected Zoom as well. Well, there's a bigger backstory, but there's a place where we practice. One of the practices that David Brazier was talking about is Zen and Pure Zen, and we do a sort of combination of that meditation side of it, and then the chanting of one of the practices, well, the Pure Zen practice, which is Handbook. And we practice in a place called Handbook. It's in Brazier. So you're welcome to come there. I'm also thinking maybe we should ask for you to write your names down, your email, so that we can actually send you.
or you could write your email.
Or I can write mine. Yeah. But yes, you're all welcome to come and chant anytime you want.
The place near the Caribbean where we were is a friend of mine who runs a retreat center there, but it isn't the same tradition. It's more Tibetan, but it's a beautiful place too. It's in Sian Khan, which is a bioreserve in Yucatan. So that's another thing you can look up. She has a small website as well.
And you can, and you can write to me if you want to. You won't necessarily get a reply within 5 minutes, but
But Alejandro can always.
usually within a week or so.
Oh, I'm also on Facebook with the same name, so that's helpful.
There's a Cadappa Buddhist center here, but the problem is in Campestre, is that it's in Spanish.
Yes.
Yes.
that's
So
it. Yeah.
this is very nice that this is public in English.
We had the same problem.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, 50 years ago.
So do we
I got the time wrong. My iPad, for some reason, my computer as it should be. And for some reason, my iPad keeps going back. And there's yeah, I've changed settings. I've done everything. I just want to